I am feeling both hopeful and a little nervous today. Birds, we have two news updates to discuss. First, management just signed a running back with 13 games of recent experience to address massive depth issues. Second, one passer threw 2 touchdowns while another struggled, leaving our backup battle completely unresolved. I will name everyone shortly. Stick around for both stories, and subscribe, pushing toward our first 3,000 subscribers. Jordan Mims and Jaylen Mahoney have officially signed with our Philadelphia Eagles, shaking up a roster that desperately needed reinforcements before the final preseason contest this Thursday. We are looking at a roster currently sitting at 91 players following the release of JT Gray and the decision to move Jaquindon Jackson to the waived injured list. Mims brings experience from his time with the New Orleans Saints, where he logged 20 carries and 12 receptions during the 2024 season, plus a brief stint with the Tennessee Titans last year. Mahoney joins the defensive back room after spending spring 2025 in the UFL, where he recorded 26 tackles and 2 pass breakups. This is where it gets real, because while adding depth is usually a positive, I am excited, but I also want to pump the brakes a little bit before we assume these guys solve our immediate personnel gaps. Is this the real deal, or are we just plugging holes on a sinking depth chart while praying for health? Losing Jackson to injury feels like a tough break for a secondary trying to solidify its standing before the final roster cuts hit. Watching how our front office manages these snaps during the finale will tell us if these additions are just warm bodies or legitimate competitors fighting for a spot on the practice squad. With limited time remaining in the preseason, I cannot help but wonder if we are thin enough at running back and defensive back to force some of these new arrivals into roles they are not yet prepared to handle during real game speed situations. Can these players truly adapt to our scheme before the season opener? If the coaching staff fails to integrate these rookies quickly, we could witness a disastrous start to the year. Why are we bringing in guys off the street just days before the preseason finale? It feels like panic, but I recognize the front office is simply scrambling to keep the unit functional after losing Jaquindon Jackson to a significant injury. Jordan Mims arrives with a track record of bouncing around rosters, including a stint in Minnesota where he failed to stick, yet he brings some professional experience from his time in New Orleans. Jaylen Mahoney joins him as a defensive back who grinded in the UFL this past spring, totaling 26 tackles before getting a look with the Jets. Think about it this way: when you are thin at these positions, you have to prioritize bodies just to handle the heavy snap counts required in these final exhibition outings. Is this really about finding a diamond in the rough, or are we just watching the staff try to survive the night without further attrition? In my opinion, filling these spots is a necessity for the practice schedule, but it is hardly a solution for our long-term secondary or backfield depth. I am optimistic that these players bring hunger, but I also want to pump the brakes a little bit before we act like these guys are going to change our trajectory this season. The reality is that roster churn at 91 players rarely yields a superstar, yet it keeps the competition alive in the trenches and throughout the defensive backfield. We need these guys to show up quickly because there is simply no time left for a slow transition. The coaching staff must prioritize schematic simplicity to ensure every depth player understands their assignment immediately upon entering the field. If these athletes can execute their fundamental responsibilities without hesitation, the entire unit will stabilize under pressure. Now let's get into the update everybody has been waiting for, because the backup quarterback situation behind our starter is officially a full-blown mystery. Offensive coordinator Sean Mannion confirmed that the competition between Tanner McKee and Andy Dalton is still wide open with nothing finalized as we push toward the regular season. I watched Tanner McKee absolutely command the field against the New England Patriots, putting together his best stretch of the summer by completing 16 of 22 passes for 173 yards and 2 touchdowns. It was a gritty, high-execution performance that forced everyone to take notice, while Andy Dalton struggled to find any rhythm, managing only 3 completions on 10 attempts for 44 yards. The part fans are not ready for is that even with that disparity, Mannion claims they are still evaluating the full body of work since April. Are we really going to drag this decision all the way to the final roster deadline? I am excited by what McKee showed us, but I also want to pump the brakes a little before we assume the job is his. Mannion mentioned they still have practice time left before Cincinnati and extra work before week 1, which means the front office is buying every second they can to make the right call. Could we end up carrying both of them on the 53-man roster? That remains the biggest question hanging over the NovaCare complex right now. It is a strange spot to be in, but the coaching staff seems determined to use every single practice snap to finalize this depth chart before the real games arrive. With training camp intensity reaching a fever pitch, veterans and rookies alike are battling for those final roster spots. Keeping the backup quarterback job open until the final roster deadline feels like a massive gamble with our season hanging in the balance. Tanner McKee demonstrated undeniable growth during that loss to the Patriots, hitting his targets with clear rhythm, while Andy Dalton struggled to find any momentum at all. And here's why that's a big deal. When you look at the raw completion numbers, McKee provided a spark that our offense desperately needs if disaster strikes. Does this performance justify handing him the clipboard immediately, or are we just witnessing a flash in the pan? I am excited by the potential development of McKee, but I also want to pump the brakes a little because professional evaluators emphasize the total body of work over a single high-pressure outing. The front office is clearly prioritizing every remaining practice snap, yet the risk of overthinking this is palpable. When you put both of today's stories together, the picture that emerges for our Philadelphia Eagles is a front office clearly scrambling to keep the ship afloat before kickoff. Linking our roster churn with the backup quarterback dilemma reveals a staff prioritizing short-term coverage over any long-term certainty. The truth is, these moves reflect a franchise stretching its resources to the absolute limit. We are adding Jordan Mims and Jaylen Mahoney because we have no choice, just as we are keeping the quarterback competition open to avoid a panic decision. Both situations underscore a thin roster struggling to find identity before the season opener arrives. I am excited to see if these fresh faces provide legitimate depth, but I also want to pump the brakes a little before expecting miracles. Does bringing in Mims and Mahoney genuinely solve our lack of experience in the backfield or secondary? Furthermore, should we really worry about the backup quarterback position remaining unsettled this late in the summer? I truly want to hear your thoughts in the comments section below. Balancing these immediate personnel needs with our long-term success remains a massive test for the entire organization during this final preseason stretch. Whether these players can secure a roster spot or get pushed to the practice squad, their impact on our depth chart will be visible immediately on Thursday night. If you enjoyed the video, do not forget to like it and subscribe to the channel. I am still pushing toward our first 3,000 subscribers, and every one of you helps me get there. Birds, I will see you in the next one. Fly, Eagles fly, as we prepare for what promises to be an absolute thriller this upcoming Sunday. Make sure your notifications are turned on so you never miss a single update.